Welcome to this series of videos on gender-sensitive project implementation in a rural context. My name is Elna and I'm a consultant with Resilience. Over the past few months, I've conducted a gender analysis for one of our irrigation projects in rural Mozambique. This series of videos is a summary of the framework that I've used for the gender analysis, the methodology, the results, and some practical tools and recommendations for future project design and implementation in an agricultural context. This is the third video of that series in which I will further elaborate on the importance of carefully defining your project beneficiaries. I will explain a conceptual framework that we've come up with that uses skills to identify qualitative requirements instead of only identifying quantitative requirements for your beneficiaries. Leading for our project in Absamvale is the use of so-called champion farmers. And these are farmers that have the means to invest in the practices that we give guidance on, and farmers that are knowledgeable enough already of agricultural practices to pass on the information that they receive in trainings to farmers around them. And so the definition of who these farmers are, more specifically the definition of your project beneficiaries, is very decisive for the successes of the project. And so we challenged ourselves to look at the definition of these beneficiaries with the gender lens. And we developed a different type of method for it. But this took us a bit of a trial and error. So that's what I want to explain to you in the next couple of slides. First of all, we started with a conversation with the technicians about their constraints, their challenges when working with female farmers and working with male farmers. But a constraint in this approach is that you start to generalize man and women. But this is actually not possible because you are working with very individual farmers, very individual situations. And so you cannot generalize. So I would say that there's greater variation between individual men and women than between the man and the women. So this approach was very limiting. We then tried to define a workable framework, and we first started with defining 4 typologies of women, which in our case range from very strong women to very dependent women. But also this doesn't do justice to the variety of women present, the variety of female farmers. And so we then tried to come up with a different type of method that would do right to these individual situations. We noticed that the variety is not to be identified between individual people, but in their situational differences regarding various topics. So in order to redesign our project's processes and successes, we had to define what topics are of most importance regarding a female farmer situation. And so we looked back to the 4 key conceptual domains identified before, and then we identified 5 different skills that we believe are most significant defining a female farmer situation. And often this is about whether she has full autonomy of decision-making power in that situation, or whether she's more dependent on, for instance, her husband or her children or other people in the community. This slide shows the first 3 skills, primarily relating to access to resources. And important to mention here is that the skills are subjective, but we believe that this does not have to limit the possibilities of skills to show the diversity of the beneficiaries. So the idea here is that the slider on the scale represents a farmer's perception regarding the situation displayed on the scale. And the skills therefore portray the farmer's experiences. And this helps us to identify the farmer's constraints and opportunities. And this will also allow you to adapt your project's design and activities to their needs. So first of all, we mentioned liberty in decision making. And liberty in decision making is more of an overarching concept. And so it includes freedom of movement, decisions for the family, activities to participate in. We mostly added this skill to show a woman's perception of her freedom. And then the second one is access to and decision making in finances. which includes the generation of income and to what extent a woman is able to decide herself what to spend her money on. So, for instance, being fully dependent here would mean that she depends on her husband to generate income. She is depending on him to make decisions. And so she cannot decide herself what to spend her money on. Then the last one here on this slide is access to resources other than finances. And here we include ownership and decision-making power of resources such as, for instance, transportation, which could include bikes or a car, but also media like mobile phone or radio use, but also access to water, access to land, access to fuel, for instance, when working with irrigation pumps. So everything that is not included when discussing finances. Our experience is that skills highlight constraints and opportunities, and that this will eventually help to develop your program further. For instance, you could use these skills when creating your log frame, or when you already have your log frame, you could place different skills and then identify together with your team where exactly on this skill would you say are we, and is that the position that we are comfortable with, or would we like to move our skills or slide our skill to another position? And then what can we do in our project to actually reach that position? So we added 2 more skills here on this slide. First of all, being education and training. And education here is about whether a farmer has had access to education and also onto what level. So that also includes being able to read or, for instance, being able to speak Portuguese or only having the knowledge of a local language. And then we combined this together with training to get a more full perception of a farmer's knowledge. And training in this case, we mean agricultural training. So to what extent does a farmer have access to these trainings or is able to fully participate? We then added time and labor, and this refers back to the concept of roles and responsibilities. So this slide is about to what extent a woman's responsibilities restrict her in a flexibility to divide her time. And so this is also about who decides what she has to do, what she can do, when she can do it, and if she has anyone to pay these responsibilities to. Thank you for watching this 3rd video in the series. In the next and 4th video of this series, I will further elaborate on the results of our gender analysis study for an irrigation project in rural Mozambique. I hope to see you in that video again.